Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. This is getting to be one of my favorite festivals. So when I come back down to this part of the country, I went to high school in Cuero, Texas. The Gobblers. I'm not lying, they named a football team after a turkey. And I learned a few things there. I learned not to start a underground newspaper that you run off of the copy machine of the radio station that you're working at and then distribute it on school grounds if it has bad words in it, because they will not suspend you, they will expel you. They will say, Mr. Covington, we wish you well elsewhere, but you can't go to school here anymore. So I joined the Air Force. But when I'm back in this area, as soon as I start seeing those Whataburgers, as soon as I start seeing those tiny towns with those statues of the mascot and those football stadiums, it kind of all comes flooding back to me. I remember all those bad words I wasn't supposed to say. Fuck, damn, goddamn, shit, dick, pussy, cunt, cock, cocksucker, motherfucker, faggot dyke, bitch, asshole, shitwit, Jesus fucking Christ himself. The sum of the parts of these words, not to mention a few like jism and turd, can still get you expelled from school, which keeps them well used and cool, no matter the rule. Like the lube we use to force language into expressions of soul or reason. Oh, Whataburger receipt. How simple it would be to have a list of good words and bad words, the right words, the wrong words, that we could print up on little cards and carry with us like ticket books, huh? That would be too easy. And it would be lazy. And it would get in the way of what we're trying to do with words anyhow, which is communicate, which is build bridges, which is build community. And it breaks my heart to read what happens in some of the communities here, some communities across the country, and definitely communities around the world, where those that know better keep trying to force everything into black and white, right, wrong, good, bad, hard rules. When most of us are swimming in gray, living in gray, making our way through the gray every day. But life isn't gray. Life is full color, full blast. I saw that Florida passed a law the other day, the Don't Say Gay law, coming to a ballot box near you, I'm sure. This is a piece that Tom talked about. We were invited up. I was invited up to take part in the Pride celebration in Sioux Falls, South Dakota earlier this year. And I think we were both cabin fever stricken enough that this man rode all the way to South Dakota and back with me so I could read this poem. It was nominated for both Best in the Net and Pushcart prizes last year. It's called The Big Queer City. When Water Tower Town Public Health School teachers teach health, they teach to the test. And then small town grads grab weapons of war and storm capitals because the test barely touched on immunology. Just chastity and say no to drugs. Another generation scared of their genitals and to stay away naturally from the big queer city. The big queer city is our home and always has been, decades through Milky Way decadence. It has wheels and rubber and chrome and a place for your unshod feet on the window glass as the world flies past, all at home. They light your face with afterburners for your passport picture and casino ID. We are freaks, not rebels. Never part of anything big enough to bother with revolution over living in third-rate opulence. Only seen in the periphery, in sideways glances, focal point zero until the phosphorescent daylight, moonrise. Freaks, minding our own business, minding the texts and lusty catacombs of centuries. Shrill red finch birds fly outside, feathered air lizards evolved, hiding none of their magic, afflit and compassionately ignorant since the start, free as fuck in the big queer city. Freaks with holes punched through the tips of our cocks, with fists stretching the lips of our cunts, and with Holy Mary, full of grace, at every banquet dessert plate, air breaks at the symphony, ventilators at the opera, bringing the house down with you. Try it next time with applesauce. Freaks. First of our kind, out way before the showroom models, fucked down by the splendor of 1,000 hard and swollen, shadowy truck stop cocks. Another star-crossed way to deny white face, white place, privilege. Sexual reparations should be made, dust to ashes, and ashes to glass, glass to shards, and shards to sand, and sand to dust again. Your mirrors cannot be trusted here. You were born with this conditioning, raised without exception. You came from nowhere, rooted to no continent. You're where eclipses go to hide. Freaks of the faggot sonatas, smoke and song and powwow drums in the big queer city, the kind of place that Vincent Cray sang about when he sang about Indians wrapped in white linen, where everyone is tripping and shining in their own right, mighty light. A spectrum should be possible here. But the tribes and tides keep swirling. It's pretty disturbing. The first few times, 100,000 dead now, and the honky-tonks in Texas try like boiling holy hell to ignore the tectonic persistence of the big queer city. And they're freaks. Deplete and delete is the plan, like the fresh-killed memories of 100 black men left on our own to catch this virus, or asphyxiated on the street by masked law and order. Queen bee lesbian avengers come down from the hills, queue down formaldehyde alleys, confined by hastily conceived border wall erections, morning wood in Washington as I kneel before the sacred things. Relics of the often absent, maybe mythic Steely Dan the Third, all the prostate boys and machine gun anarchist, everybody tripping and shining in the big queer city. Monogamy is vice at its worst. I am monogamous to my vices, because I've had more than my fucking fill of a million good things, like that second cigarette of the day, enjoyed indoors after dinner, secondhand, sinister, and not caring at all until it occurs. Where did all the ashtrays go? filled with ashy butts and thrown away like all of that sweet monogamy. The fashion pages and fun drive radio princesses agreed at around 50,000 dead that we'd be wearing sequins and low drag when the pandemic passed, that the 20s would roar like a clown in the commode car, backed up and emotionally blocked with explosions of orgone, super-saturated semen pitched like dazzling teepees set up on the neutral grounds, up and down Elysian after a storm. Sweet Sandia Sugar Mountain silence does not oppose the big queer city. Cinnamon and chocolate overtones, coffee flown from San Antonio, and I am crying out in flower song for Edward, disco beat, drum and fife machine, junk sick and horned up, transfixed, neutered, inglorious corsetry, floggers sewn from iguana tails, whipping adolescents from cunt lip Texas into uniform for the duration. They carry Bibles and icons of General Mattis into futility. There will be pride this year in the big queer city. We will celebrate our unique abilities, unique histories, unique societies, and demand human dignity, human ancestry, human artistry in the countryside and in the big queer city. Thank you. Oh, if we talk about censorship and what do words mean anymore, what can words mean anymore, everyone seems to have their own definition of what censorship is. Everyone has a new definition of what fascism is. Censorship is when the people that you elect to represent you don't let you speak your mind or express yourself as you hope to, as you wish to. It's not the business owner saying that you can't do something in their store. It's not me telling you on social media, I don't like what you say. I can ignore you. But the people that are supposed to be running the joint, we don't give them the right to make those decisions in this country. They're trying like hell to take it back. All that being said, there's a responsibility that comes with every freedom. When I was homeless, I found myself out in Berkeley, California, and I started entering the poetry scene there, open mics, and one of the folks that I met out there, her name was Julia Vinograd, and some of you may have seen this photograph of a woman in People's Park putting a flower down a rifle barrel when then Governor Ronald Reagan sent troops to clear out student protesters from a park not far from the Berkeley campus. Actually, it was University of California property. And she stayed in Berkeley, became a fixture in the poetry scene there. I know that Karen was just posting something about her not long ago. Great role model. And she told a story one day on Central Avenue upstairs at Cafe Med, which doesn't exist anymore. It's a cannabis dispensary now. But she talks about coming out of an anti-war poetry reading back in the early 70s. And the speaker was like, the war is over, the war is over. It can be over if we say it's over. And everybody got very excited at the idea of this war, which was drafting young men. A lot of them were coming home in body bags. To say nothing of what was going on with the Vietnamese and to the Vietnamese. So as the poetry reading broke up, they exploded out of the coffee shop and ran into a tavern. And Julia talks about running up to an elderly woman and saying, the war is over. Didn't you hear? The war is over. And the old woman, she said, started crying. And she said, the Lord has just answered my greatest prayer. My son can come home now. Yes, we have the freedom to say and do just about anything we want to do. The only responsibility we have is to think and to speak compassionately. This is a poem I used to read quite a bit when I was mainly known as a veteran poet. This is from my very first chapbook that ever came out. It's called Like the Prayers of an Infidel. I think it was 2009 or 2010. 24 fucks and a cunt. He said fuck 24 times, and that lady said she was a lesbian and told people about her cunt. Riding home from the poetry reading, my teenage nephew was shell-shocked. I was reading some poems about the war and had invited him along with me, the kind of thing Christian Texan parents would never approve of. 24 fucks and a cunt. Right out loud and everything. And I told him what I thought freedom meant, how we all have a responsibility to speak, even to shock sometimes, if that's the only thing that works, about how hundreds and thousands of Marines and airmen and sailors and soldiers and everyday heroes of conscience had lost their lives protecting freedoms we have to gather in smoky bars or suburban bookstores and read, to speak out loud, 24 fucks and a cunt. And I knew he was listening, absorbing that 17-year-old apathy momentarily thawed, and he thanked me for bringing him along for 24 fucks and a cunt. When he joined the Army, I wasn't surprised. Small Texas towns send more than their share off to seemingly brighter tomorrows and seemingly bigger worlds. At his boot camp graduation, I asked him, standing there, skinny in his plain, rankless green dress uniform, what made you decide to enlist? And he told me about that day and 24 fucks and a cunt. He said he wanted to fight like I had and be able to write about it someday and read about it and let folks know how it really is. And I was sad and proud. 10 months later, 24 fucks and a cunt sent my nephew to war, not the kind of war where you blast CGI aliens and save the world from the living room floor, nor the kind of war where John Wayne or Clint Eastwood or Tom Hanks stagger and swagger through mountains of slain enemy soldiers with the American flag as music flourishes and rolls. No. 24 fucks and a cunt sent a boy not old enough to buy a beer into the kind of war where you can get martyred while eating a catered meal in a green zone. The kind of war where, while handing out candy to a group of children, a mother approaches and detonates the 10 pounds of explosives strapped to her thighs. The kind of war where a convoy of building materials is attacked with makeshift roadside explosives. The kind of war with no front lines, no end, no victory. It was April when we heard about it. My nephew was coming home. We could pick him up at the airport ourselves, or the Army could arrange it with the mortuary for us. And I wonder, in those last moments of terror inside of that Humvee, if 24 fucks and a cunt seemed worth it. If he thought at all that day about poetry, probably not. Those who've never served will never understand why others volunteer, how others do it, what it means to fight and kill and die so. When poets who have never fought write about war, 24 fucks and a cunt can seem like great ideas. But words can be as deadly as a sword when cast from the mouths of babes to the ears of babes. I'd like to engrave my own epitaph onto that gray government stone if the words were allowed. Here lies an American soldier who was killed in Iraq over 24 fucks and a cunt. Thank you so much for your hospitality. Thank you for hosting this panel. It's a conversation. My name is P.W. Covington. I have some things for sale, as most of us do over here. Make sure you hit that up after you taste those cookies.
Thank you, PW.